Water.
Johnny Brandenburg.
Yes.
You're the quietest I have ever heard of you.
It's a learning experience.
Do you have any story you want to relate, or?
Well, I think it's interesting to hear the story that you've been telling, but I look at it from a different aspect. Where Hal Yeager's home is here in town, that was the old Fuller house built by the Fuller family, one of the first buildings in the community. And they were tied in with the Caribel mine. My dad worked at the Caribel mine, and the little cabin right behind Pioneer Lodge that Peterson just remodeled for those folks, that's where my mother and dad lived when I was born. And right up there a little bit was my granddad's house, and that's the building that was blowing up when they had a post office right here in town.
Well, it was Pierce was the fellow that built the house, and he was president of the Caribel. And Fuller added the second story.
Yeah,
and Caribel was Pierce's wife's name.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, we have a disagreement here. We have another version of that story.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, I was fortunate enough in 1928 to live with Bert Pratt, the man that promoted the Caribel mine. He had a daughter.
River 24 Blind Cove, U1019,
He had a daughter by the name of Caroline, and his wife was named Belle. So they named it Caribel.
All right, okay, that's great.
That I know because I.
Yeah, I believe that. I got some.
Yeah, very well.
I thought you all missed that. I said you knew Caroline. He said, yeah, very well.
that's the story that I heard too. But I saw what I started saying was the family that had that building, the Fullers, they left when the mine closed down. They left. And that building stayed empty for a long time. Bob Prunty and I used to go there and play in that old Fuller house. And all the doors and windows were out, and cattle would stand in there in the daytime and get in the shade. And then Will Johnson bought that property and cleaned it all up, and he rented it to Mary Hoover from Dawson and Mrs. Florence Fazell from Kansas City, Missouri. Mrs. Fazell had two children, Bob and Dorothy. And Bob was a little bit older than myself, and Dorothy and I were about the same age. And I had a little brown mare named Beauty. And my dad had a little store here. What made me think of this is some of the little stories that happened here. My dad had a little store and a post office later. And men that were working out in the hills prospecting, they didn't come to town every day for their mail. And they would tell my dad or my mother that, you know, I'm looking for a letter from Fort Scott or Buffalo, New York, or wherever. If it comes in, I'd appreciate it if you'd have one of the kids bring it up to me. Well, one of the kids was me. And Dorothy Fazell. But we had a lot of fun. We met all the miners. We rode to all the old cabins. And things that you remember when you remember those men was the fact they were humble, they were poor, they were kind, they were poor, just really dirt poor. But the thing I still remember, when you would approach their living area, you would smell pinto beans cooking, or apricots cooking, or peaches, prunes, or raisins. Those were their staples. And coffee, of course. G.B. Crow, when my dad was working on the Dyke Tunnel over here in Pioneer Canyon, G.B. Crow came along to visit my daddy, and the old gentleman chewed beech nut. And my dad had just cleaned all these, taken all the bark off these ties, and was going to carry them into the portal for braces inside the mine. And Mr. Crow spit a big old wad of tobacco on that clean log, and that kind of aggravated me. So I went down. He had a sack of flour sitting down on the roadway where he laid it down, carrying it up to his cat, and I ripped out a sack of flour to get even with him for spitting on my dad's timber. My dad got even with me because he let me carry that flour up to Mr. Crow's cabin. Well, ever after that, Mr. Crow and I became real close friends. And whenever he needed something carried up there, Dorothy Fazell and I would get my little mare, and we'd take it up there. And the old man would always offer you a cup of coffee. And you could always tell when you'd get your cup of coffee that that cup had been used by somebody else, so you'd put it over here and drink out of this side. Always had a ring around it. It was always, well, he wasn't very fussed about washing dishes. And the Moberg, Mr. Moberg, was at the old claim that fellow talked about in Pioneer Canyon, and Harry and Oscar were the two boys, and I think they came from Kentucky, as I recall, visiting the old man Moberg. And the old man died in Raton, he's buried in Raton, and the two, Harry and Oscar, were veterans of the First World War, and they both received pensions, and they drank themselves to death after that, and were buried in Albuquerque.
And they swapped off the old Edison Victrola, you know, that had the Irish tunes on it, and the old man Moberg would crank up that, and Harry and Oscar would get out there on the floor and dance a jig, you know, to the... You was up there when they did that, wasn't you? That's the one Tony Simeon got when he traded him liquor for it.
Yes, and that's one that you and I would like to see remain in the valley. But when Tony Simeon died, when Tony Jr., when he died, Bob bid on that Victrola to try to see if we couldn't keep it in the valley. And I wanted to bid, but I wouldn't bid against Bob. And there's another guy that bid us up, and he bought the Victrola and carried it out of the valley.
$800.
But we'd like to...
What did they pay for?
$800.
But it had the old beeswax cylinders to it.
Yeah,
I
had
remember.
beeswax cylinder, the big Morning Glory horns went out. Still had the old Irish tunes. I think he had 20 some odd records there for it. Well, I just